What's up, everyone? Thanks for bearing with us. I was at a conference most of the day. Honestly, it's been a crazy day. I spoke at a conference, B2B Sales and Marketing Exchange here in Boston at 10:30 on the Dark Funnel. I had a couple of events and podcasts that are going on, and then there was a boat party. There was a boat party, and the boat showed up to the dock 15 minutes later than expected, which is why I'm a little late. But we are really ready to dive in. We got two topics going on. Also, I'm not sure what the publishing schedule on the podcast, but the one that I did today, I think, is something that people are going to want to listen to. It was pretty cool. And maybe we'll do a deeper version for all the DGLers because they cut me. So I thought I was going to have 45 minutes, and I got there, and they're like, you only got 30. I had to completely change my talk track and stuff. But anyway, let's get into the agenda, the promised agenda. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to start. We'll start at the alternative to buyer personas. This was a really interesting one. This came up today with a question that someone asked me, and I had never really connected the dots, but here's the challenges that I see with how buyer personas are crafted and used right now. So buyer personas are typically like a one-page document or a PDF, and inside of those documents or PDFs, what I typically find, and I have done this myself as a marketer, so I'm not throwing stones, but you typically find surface level details, stereotypes, sometimes things that just literally aren't true, or just mapping this persona directly to the pain points that your product solves. And the second thing that I think is really interesting is that once it's made, the benefit that it gives to other people in the organization, I think, is quite low. And so what I've been encouraging people to think about, right, like people listen to my stuff, everyone on DGL does, and it's marketers should go and talk to customers. And then someone came to me today and was like, I have 60 marketers on my team. Should all of my marketers be out talking to customers? And so I came up with this idea, which I think is a really strong one for two reasons. One, it's going to give you way more depth. Two, it's going to be available to everyone on your team. And three, it's going to be consistently updated with real-time information. And so what I think people should think about is I think that companies should think about having a podcast where they interview customers and prospects and influential people. And maybe that podcast would also drive demand. But it could secondarily, as a secondary use case, if you're going out and you're targeting CMOs, and then you have somebody that's going to interview all of those CMOs, just like product marketers do right now, but it's recorded and then put in a format that people will consume. I think that the communication of what customers actually want and need and how they talk and things like that could get distributed to the rest of the company in a much more effective way than what's happening right now. I thought about doing this in 2018, specifically for the sales team, because we were selling a highly technical, complex product into hospitals, and our salespeople were not technical or clinical by nature. And so they had to learn this stuff, and what they would do is they would send them to HQ for 2 weeks of onboarding and training, and then put them in the field and hope that like sales enablement could get it through. And what I was thinking is, hey, these people are driving, their field sales reps, they're driving across the state. Like, why couldn't we produce a podcast with this thought leader about how they're using our product in the ICU or how they're doing this, and make it in a format that salespeople would actually get value from, that would actually listen to, so that when they went into those meetings, they could say, actually, I was listening, blah, blah, blah physician. I was listening to this this person speak who actually ran this clinical trial, and here's what they found. And so I think it's an interesting alternative. The feedback that I get across the board in the market is that buyer personas are not living up to the amount of helpfulness that they need. And so that's an alternative that people could consider.
I love that. I was wondering where you were going to go with this agenda topic, but I like where we ended up.
Nice.
We're actually collecting some questions, but I think that you should tackle the next one, and then let's just go AMA hard for the rest of the time. How about that?
Nice. Yeah, now that my heart rate's down a little bit because I was like speeding to try and get back here. Now I was following all the laws. Don't worry. Cool. The next one that we're getting into, I thought this was really interesting. I was just walking around, and I think I was walking my dog. My dog's at my mom's right now, but I was walking my dog earlier, and all I was thinking about is like, I was thinking about the talk that I was going to do today, and then I thought about if I was trying to communicate the Refine Lab strategy, not the strategy that we necessarily deploy with companies, but our business strategy, and I was trying to simplify it, how would I communicate that to people? And so I think I have it pretty down. And I'll break it in. I'm debating on whether or not it's 2 or 3. I'll just include 3, and then if we want, we can cut the last one out. Number 1, I think everyone knows this one, but I think that ours is a little bit more specific. Create a differentiated product to a highly targeted ideal customer profile that literally needs your product. I think that companies always go too broad on their targeting, or they don't have a differentiated product because they have a Me Too product. But I think that most people recognize that product really matters. And then the second component of the strategy is create the best B2B marketing content on the internet and then put it in the dark funnel. And that's pretty much the entire strategy. You could put team in there, right? We love our team. We have the most talented people here. You could put team in there, but I'm trying to simplify it mainly to make the point of how important the content motion that we're delivering and how we're delivering is important to the strategy. And I don't think a lot of people consider that in their business. And so what are we doing when we create the best content on the internet and then put it in the dark funnel? And what does that mean? And so I'm thinking like super broadly, I find this really fascinating. I did this today. I'll give you an example. I did this, it wasn't today, but it was a recent day. I saw a LinkedIn ad for some tool. Maybe it was an HR tech tool. I'm not exactly sure. I saw some LinkedIn ad. I thought it was cool, didn't click on it, screenshotted the ad and dropped it in a group Slack channel in our internal Slack so that other people can see it. That's an interesting motion for the dark funnel. That happens with my content too. I post content on LinkedIn, and then I let through just general platform dynamics, right? So if I put the content on LinkedIn, a lot of my followers that are engaged are going to see it. People that are not following me but are connected with second degree connections with people that liked my post are also going to start to see that content, and then comments move it. I've been taking, and I know people do this, they take my LinkedIn post, they click the little send button, and they send it as a direct message to a colleague or a peer. They can copy the link and then drop it inside of a Slack channel or a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group or a community. And how that content is moving and going, I think is really, really interesting for the sole purpose and the sole belief, because the shareability and word of mouth is really what matters. And so being able to, and I was on this, the boat like recently, a lot of people had seen my content before. I got some compliments, but one of the key things that they said, hey, I love your content. I share it with my team in Slack all the time. And it's just it's so interesting because I don't think a lot of companies think about it that way, where if you actually created good stuff that people really liked, that made an impact for them, and how much they shared it, how much accelerated awareness, consideration, overall business development could happen for you. You can do the same exact thing on paid, and you can do the same exact thing on a podcast or other channels. And that's kind of it. I guess if I was the third one that I was considering, just to be transparent, the third one that I'm considering is rapidly innovate and operationalize. And so as we started the company, we've continued to add layers, service layers, and technology on top of what we're doing in order to consistently get better. I think this is a product thing that a lot of people understand and get value from. But as a service business at the moment, most service businesses do not do that. They find the thing that they do, they understand how they can make it as profitable as possible, and they just keep doing that. The example that I give, the companies that are telling you to run LinkedIn ads right now, what happens when LinkedIn ads become $300 CPM and it's a terrible buy for you? What are they going to do? They're probably going to keep selling you LinkedIn ads. And so because we are aligned to business outcomes like pipeline and revenue, if LinkedIn ads aren't helping us get to that outcome, then we're already going to know the 3 or 4 other things to do. And I think that's a unique component of the strategy as well. But I think a lot of the things on the fringe that I mentioned, product, service, innovation, I think a lot of people recognize that. And the main point that I was trying to drive home is how ingrained and integrated our content strategy is into the growth of our company.
There are a few people that wanted some clarification on the dark funnel. So can you just break that down for some newer listeners that haven't been as familiarized with that concept?
100%. Just spoke on it this morning, so I got my talk track lined up. The reality is that B2B buyers are discovering, researching, and evaluating products in a ton of places that companies can't track: organic social, non-conversion based paid social, earned PR, third-party events, Slack communities, Facebook and LinkedIn groups, other communities like Peak Community, and additionally just word of mouth between peers that could happen through DMs, text messages, phone calls, or anything like that. All of those channels are not getting attributed in attribution software, and because they're not getting attributed, they don't get attention and budget. And I just listed out the channels for you. And then think about what you do as a buyer and where you discover products. And inside of your buying process, what do? You go to those different places. It was interesting. Somebody had never really figured out how to explain this part of the concept, but I feel like I really have it, which is somebody asked me about, has my stance changed on SEO, right? And so my stance on SEO is people can do it, if you want to go for SEO, or if you have a $7 a month product and you need to go pure organic, then you should do it. What I'm trying to help people understand is there are significantly better places to get to your customers to create demand in the market and get better business results. And so if you can do all of them, awesome. But if you have to choose, I highly recommend using other channels. And this is why. In 2011, when SEO was at its prime, maybe from 2011 to 2014, 15, and honestly earlier, but in B2B, it was really in that time period, the buyers did not have the access to trusted peers that they do today. Everyone was a B2B, I'm not sure everyone, but a lot of people on this call were B2B professionals in 2011. You didn't use LinkedIn. You weren't in communities. The only time that you saw people that did your job was when you were in the office, you went to some local networking event, or you were at an industry conference. Those were the times that you saw people that did your job. And so because you didn't have access to all of the peer information, the places that you got information from were analyst firms, vendors, or if you couldn't get an answer from those people or you didn't want one, you would go to Google and find it. And now, 2011, you would go to Google and you would make a search, and now you'll go to Slack, LinkedIn, a trusted peer direct communication, and you'll ask them. You'll make the search there. What product should I use for this? I'm comparing these two things. What's your experience? I'm trying to cancel my contract with this. Who should I switch to? I'm considering between these 4 companies, which one should I choose? I think that companies are doing that less in search and other places that companies love to use. And they're doing it way more in some of these channels that we would consider dark funnel channels, because they're third party, either content or otherwise, platforms that either don't have an incentive to push you the data, but most likely have significant privacy policies with their users that would prevent them from ever giving you the data about who's watching your videos, who's sending messages, etc. And so that's essentially a broad stroke of the dark funnel. And because companies can't measure them, a lot of companies don't do them at all. And if they do them, they're putting together a podcast, doing one episode a month just to check the box and say they're doing a podcast. And so I'm trying to help people really understand that all of the restrictions of marketing behavior inside of these channels are caused by the obsession with attribution.
I would also add, especially as it relates to breaking down our strategy at Refine Labs, is I think you touched on this, but I think everything we do has a focus on driving real, sustainable business results. And then I think the other aspect, and curious if you agree or disagree with this, is focus. Like, we focus on doing a core set of activities, and we get that in place to a level of excellence before we begin to layer on additional initiatives and strategies from there. And I think those two elements on top of what you laid out, I think kind of round out what makes us different from other companies that think they're like us.
Totally. And I intend to do like a keynote or something that goes into way more depth on our strategy. I was trying to like sort of simplify. It's been a super long day, but I will go back because yes, focus, alignment to business results, structure of the process. There are a lot of components that if I went to a second or a third layer, I think a lot of people would get value from.
Yeah, definitely. Should we get into some Q&A? All right.
Let's do it.
Andrew Smallwood, you submitted a question in advance. Love it when you do that. Just reply to the email on Tuesday and send your question in. We'll bring you on. I'm going to bring you on audio so that you can ask your question live. Go ahead, Andrew.
Sure. So I guess my question would be, what are some of the questions you think marketers should be asking customers or interviewing customers with that they aren't today?
So it's interesting because I did a specific, someone interviewed me about this specifically today. And at the beginning, yes, I think that they're going to feel like interviews, but as quickly as possible, one of the goals is to get to a place where people feel like you're a peer so that it feels like a conversation, not an interview. And there's a difference to me, and it's actually sort of challenging to cross that. I've been a marketer and I've been doing more like formal interviews, and I just feel like you get more. What I'm trying to help people understand from a market research standpoint is you need to create a system when it's happening all the time, right? I was in that conference all day, learned a ton of stuff, met a bunch of people, heard what other people were saying, heard what people are listening to, heard what they thought about it. I get 100 comments a day on LinkedIn from marketers. I get a ton of awesome questions from all of you. I interact with a bunch of companies. So it's just like ingrained in the overall strategy of we're constantly interacting with customers and collecting a bunch of data. And we actually don't have like a ton of core like purposes for it, right? It's just happening. We're not like, oh, we want to learn about this, let's go survey people. We're just learning. Anyway, that didn't cover your question, so let's get into that. In terms of the things that you should be trying to figure out from people is, what are their goals? How are they measured? How do they feel about, what's their opinion of that? How do they feel about that? So if you look at a framework, one interesting framework is fact, opinion, feeling. So it's like, what are your goals? How do you think about that? How do you feel about that? So you can have a 3-layer question sequence to really start to get into it. So goals, overall priorities, things that they're considering using, things that they've tried that haven't worked, and understand why. I think those are some general ones, but the real interest, and then there's a ton of product specific ones, right? So if I was working at that medical device company, it's like, what type of patients do you treat? What percentage of those patients stay in the ICU for more than 3 days? You can sort of get really specific once you know what the actual product is doing. But the real value and why you do qualitative interviews is that every time someone says something to you, you have the opportunity to ask how or why or another open-ended question to keep going. And so even when I'm doing interviews for demand marketers, like, I ask them a question just as a setup to hear what they say, to go down a talk track and ask 5 or 6 more questions in an interview format to understand if they know what they're talking about. And so, what's working the best for you right now? And somebody says ABM, and then I say, oh, okay, like, how are you doing ABM? And then they start telling you, and they say, okay, why did you do that? How are you measuring that? And then you actually get to the outcome of whether or not they know what they're talking about, or they're just regurgitating the messaging of some ABM vendor, which a lot of people do. When it comes back to customers, the whys, I think, are the most valuable. I'm sure Megan's got some good stuff too.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think one tactic that works really well is really remembering what your goal is. Your goal is to actually try to understand your customer's point of view from their point of view, and really truly understand their context. Ideally, the first step, completely independent from your product or service, right? Mm-hmm. And so an exercise in empathy, right? Like, what if I was being interviewed, and what are the questions that I would want someone to ask me so that I could tell them about my context, my situation, my goals, my challenges, my pain points. And so that exercise, like, your customer is just another person and you're a customer to other people. And so just reframing that in your head can help you, I think, just use your empathy muscle to help you use common sense to put some questions together. And I would say, I would always start with questions about them and their context, and dig really deep into that before you start asking product or service specific questions, because there are two separate goals there. But if you jump to too many specific questions about your product or service, you could be missing some really important insights, answers, responses that could be much more meaningful that you might not get to if you move too quickly to the stuff that you care about. Hope that was helpful, Andrew. I'll just unmute you again. Any follow-up questions, or did that give you enough to work with?
I thought it was great, and I appreciate the additional point of just how do you get the team immersed in conversation with customers, and whether it's the podcast strategy or whatever you're doing, how do you get them continually in conversation with people, where people are free to communicate, what they're really thinking, feeling, etc. Thought that was great.
Yeah, now that I think about it, you could do a format like Demand Gen Live with a customer, with some of the people at your company in the audience, that could also become a podcast, but allows people to be able to ask Q&A and things afterwards, which could be like a 2.0 strategy of just doing a podcast.
Ooh, David Tarner.
I know, I saw that one. I was like, I want that question.
Yeah, all right. We're going to give it to you, Chris. David, I'm going to bring you on. I'm asking you to unmute. Would love for you to come on and ask that question live. Haven't seen Chris this pumped for a question in a minute.
I was like, I can't wait to answer this one.
Dark funnel, split the funnel, all sorts of things. I promise I can unmute people. David, you see that? Can you come on? Did he leave? All right. Let me ask on his behalf. So here's the question. Can you connect the dark funnel concept to the split the funnel exercise you use? When you split the funnel, you're using CRM marketing source data that is not taking into account any of the dark funnel channels. For instance, I have leads tagged Facebook leads. I know that there are dark funnel touch points I'm not accounting for when I tag a lead to Facebook. How does that impact the accuracy of the split the funnel exercise? I know you account for this. I want to understand it better. Thanks.
It's a great question, David. So the appropriate time to really use the split the funnel concept is for companies that are on the MQL hamster wheel, that are only running lead gen, that spend all of their budget that way, and that use every channel conversion based, which a lot of companies do. It's appropriate for a lot of different companies because that's their only goal. There's no need to look at the dark funnel when all they're doing is running $200,000 a month in Google ads and $100,000 a month in LinkedIn ads to collect ebooks, and then doing $2K a month in retargeting on Facebook that's driving no impact. And so when you put all of those things together, it's just lead gen and then gets pushed to an SDR and attributed to a channel, which is why you can quote unquote split the funnel as a way to help executives understand why they should move to a model that works in the dark funnel and deprioritizes attribution. And so I don't necessarily see them working together. I see you have old model, you run split the funnel, which allows you to get buy-in to go and execute in the dark funnel. It's a lot of funnels, but that's the way it works. It's a great question.
That was a great one. Yeah. There's a LinkedIn post in your future on this topic. I'll call it now. I've got a few questions that have been requested that I ask anonymously. So I've got another good one for you. This is from a marketing director in a very specific niche. She, works full time at a company, but she's beginning to get more and more inquiries for people to hire her on a contract or project basis. She's interested in exploring some of those opportunities, but she's having trouble understanding how she should price her services. Should she, consider her current salary? She's having trouble finding anything online about how to cost out either per hour or per project or for some of these things that have been coming her way. Any advice?
So I'll go in two, maybe three different directions with you. So the easiest way, I'm not saying this is the best way, but the easiest way would be to take your salary, convert it to an hourly rate, and then multiply it times 3. That's what most consulting firms do. So if you made, I'm not going to be able to do the math in my head, but you get that, right? So you make a salary, you convert it to hourly, then you multiply it times 3, and that would be a normal consulting rate, which will typically end up somewhere between, for a marketer, somewhere between $100 and $350 an hour, probably. That's one way to do it. However, I'm not a big fan of charging by time. I did that initially when I was running a consultant, and I thought it was so dumb that I had like 15 extra minutes and I needed to hit a retainer number and I had to figure out how to use those last 15 minutes. And so the way that I think companies, or how you should consider in terms of pricing your service, is actually truly value based. So it doesn't matter how much you make right now. It doesn't matter how much time you're spending. What matters is, do you have a clear business metric that you move? How much do you move it by? And then how valuable is it for companies to have that metric moved, right? People come in to Refine Labs and they're like, oh my God, you're so expensive. I see the pricing on your website. And I'm like, yeah, because for a majority of the companies that work with us, they see at least on average an 83% increase in qualified pipeline in 6 months. And I know that nobody else can do that, or not nobody else, but I'm pretty confident that very few other alternatives that you're looking at that are lower cost have any shot of doing that. And I know how valuable that is to a company, and that's why we price the way that we do. And so you could go with the value-based pricing is a second one, and then I'll just sort of like open it up into a different type of conversation. But for people like whoever asked this question that are really good at what you do and can get a lot of other people to know that you're good at what you do through producing content on the internet, building a strong network or any other way, there's a real like work model here where instead of being a marketing director making whatever $125,000 to $175,000 a year, that you actually work for 4 companies simultaneously and make $400,000 a year as a consultant, and then you can build a little business. You can take all of the tax benefits, and you can take home way more money, and you can do less work. I know, because when I started my company, that's what I thought I was going to do, and now here we are. And so there's a real model for people that are confident that they can get work done, are comfortable doing business development, are comfortable with a little bit of less of security than a W-2 role. I think there's a real opportunity for some people there. And I think that more specialists will move to that model purely because it's way more financially viable, way more attractive that way than working for one individual company. So maybe there's some extra questions on that, but took it in a different direction. I see the model of work for specialists sort of changing in that direction, or it's already happening, but moving further that way.
Yeah, I think really solid advice. I think what I would add is, if you've never done any type of consulting before, and if you've predominantly, been a full-time position at a company, I think that you can't really go wrong by just, choosing one of the different pricing models that Chris outlined and just giving it a try. I think it's also really important to make sure that you enjoy that type of work. You can always raise your prices or rethink how you charge for your time after you do one particular project, but don't forget about the element of validating, like, is this something I enjoy and I like? And if you have a full-time position and can work on a side project to explore that, I think that's a good next step for you to first clarify for yourself how you like to work, what gets you excited. And so, I think I wouldn't over-index on, am I charging the right amount with your first project? I think it's more an exploratory option of if you like that. And then if you do, you can continue to, over time, change your pricing, expand, and maybe even, go out on your own. But you don't have to assume that you're going to love it or that one of those models will work. I think it's important to be self-aware and go through that exploration for your own clarity.
I got something that popped into my head that wasn't on the agenda, but I actually want to talk about it, if that's cool.
Oh, I'll allow it, please.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the permission. I'm noticing something really funky going on with Google properties that deliver ads, display, YouTube, or paid search, that I want to make people aware of. And I'm also seeing, I don't know whether, it's hard for me to tell whether companies know that this is happening and are just doing it anyway to pump up metrics for investors, or if they literally are just ignorant and don't know. But I'm watching a lot of product-led companies make this move, and I watch enterprise companies that do it and drive a specific outcome, and I'm here to tell you about it. So if you use YouTube ads in B2B, and so first off, on YouTube, targeting is very, very difficult in B2B if you don't have a large TAM. There's no company requirements. You can't target by job title. You basically have retargeting, and then you let Google do whatever it wants, and you can target based on the search queries that people made. But if you use custom intent instead of search queries, the Google algorithm is going to be way too wide and give it to whoever. And so what people will do is they'll take a retargeting audience or otherwise, and then they'll turn on Google's audience expansion for YouTube ads. And here's what happens. Start running the ads, and then all you see is just complete trash coming through the demo form. Garbage, janitor, like they say that they work at TikTok and they don't. Plumber, all the Gmails, fake companies. But they don't get attributed to the exact channel. so that it doesn't look like it's coming from YouTube. The same thing can happen in CPC. CPC's Google paid search, that is a little bit more obvious because most of the time you do have attribution. And the most common cause of this is actually running display ads through GDN. And so the way that I see it being used in product-led companies to literally just call out the behavior because it's just burning money, product-led companies will take hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. They'll put it on display ads, paid search, or YouTube. They'll turn on the expansion algorithm and just let Google drive trash into their sign-up form to pump up sign-up numbers. It's happening. It's thousands of sign-ups that they get that they go report back to investors to raise a Series B, and it's complete smoke and mirrors. And so I honestly don't know the answer. I don't know if companies know that it's happening this way and that they're doing it for that, or they literally just don't know and they just sit and look at dashboards go up and never look at the actual records of who's submitting the forms. Because if you actually looked with any level of common sense, you would know that it's complete trash. I think that it's bots. I think that Google takes bots and then have bots that get attributed to the ads and then come through a different channel so it doesn't get attributed to display or otherwise or YouTube, and then they have them submit and they come through organic search or direct traffic and submit a demo, and it's garbage. And it helps Google run conversions inside of their platform so that you spend more money. And there's something really wrong going on there because I've seen it happen at 4 or 5 companies in a row, and all you got to do, turn on audience expansion on YouTube ads, do the same thing on display, sit back and just wait and just watch it happen. And so there's something going on there, and I don't like it.
I love how my advice on seeking self-awareness and clarity inspired that topic. That was an awesome one. No follow-up questions on that, but loved how I knew you'd sneak in a third agenda item one way or another. I actually got more questions that were sent in advance. Ready for the next one?
Yeah, of course.
All right. I think this is a pipeline marketing question. How much emphasis do you put on marketing for prospects already in a buying cycle, and how do you measure the impact of any of those strategies?
So in a buying cycle means that there's an open opportunity with that account. This is how I'll interpret the question. And so when I look at this, the answer is to do both, but you basically have 2 levers if you're like a holistic marketer to move this number. You can go and market to the people that are actively in pipeline, or you can market to people that aren't and bring them in, and when they're in, they are way higher quality and way better. And so you can use either path. We do pipeline marketing for companies. They want to take all of the accounts out that have opportunities open in certain stages inside of Salesforce. We'll pull it in to metadata. We'll take that. We'll build the account list. We'll set the job titles. We'll market to them on Facebook and Instagram. And you don't have a lot of conversion mechanisms. One of the ways, I'm thinking out loud here because we don't have a really good answer to this except for looking at like gross numbers of like close won deals or different things like that. I'll go into a couple different ideas. One is that you could split the accounts in half. So you could basically look at all of your active pipeline, put them into 2 groups, and then run one has over the top pipeline marketing, the other one doesn't, and look at those as a base thing. The challenge is that the volume's probably not going to be high enough to give anything that's statistically relevant, and you might make the wrong decision based on that one sample size of data. The other thing that you could feasibly think about doing is looking at the accounts that you're marketing to in pipeline marketing, set certain UTM parameters in the ads, and then you can actually track that at the account level using 6 Sense or another like account de-anonymization tool. And so we have the accounts in pipeline we have a UTM tag that includes pipeline marketing, and then I go into 6sense and create a segment that includes, if the UTM tag includes, medium or campaign includes pipeline marketing, then I'm going to be able to look at all of those accounts that are engaging with that content. Like it gives you something, but in my view, it's like not ultra valuable. Secondarily, you miss all of the impact of the view, which I believe drives more impact than the clicks. So, I don't have a good answer for this one.
It was good enough. I've got another good question, actually, that I think we have some new faces tonight. So I think we cover some things that we've talked about before, but this is very specific, asking how would you measure or correlate LinkedIn activity to pipeline and revenue? And it made me think of the how did you hear about us? Because I've been seeing all of those come in every day for us. So I think an opportunity to reiterate that approach in addition to any other thoughts to that question.
Yeah. Any of the dark funnel channels that I listed, organic, social, or LinkedIn, would be one of them. You're going to need different measurement mechanisms in order to accurately quantify the impact. The one that we're recommending right now and the one that we use at our company is something that we're calling self-reported attribution, where in the main conversion form, you actually ask the customer with an open text box, how did you hear about us? And they'll tell you. And so if LinkedIn was making an impact, or if Facebook ads were making an impact, you're going to get LinkedIn or you're going to get Facebook. People are not going to tell you it was a Facebook ad. They're going to tell you what channel. And then you need to figure out, based on your mix, was it ads or organic? And that's just sort of part of the dark funnel. It's not going to be perfect. A lot of marketers struggle because it's not perfectly drawn up in the way that they are usually accustomed to seeing it. So self-reported attribution is one of them. But in the real answer is to be in the channel and be executing and know that it's working. Like, I put self-reporting attribution inside of our form just so I could create the data so that I could show everyone how much different what a customer tells you, where they heard about you, versus what you're seeing in attribution software, because it's different. But I didn't need that information. I'm in there. I know. I see all the CMOs that are engaging. I just went to that event and had a bunch of people tell me that they love my content and share it. Like, the information that people give you qualitatively is the insight.
I do think, though, that adding a how did you hear about us free form text field is how, if you are in a company, you can begin to collect the data to make the business case, because knowing is important, but a lot of people are in different contexts where they have to prove that their feeling is correct. And it's seriously, I think you did it in like 2 minutes one morning. It's like the quickest, easiest thing that you can do to start to get really actionable data to begin to shift people's perspectives into everything that we talk about on here. So super easy tip that everyone they could do it right now if they wanted. So encourage people to take action. Okay. I have a little essay that was submitted in advance, like a situation of what would you do if you were in my situation.
Oof. Okay.
So you should probably get out your notebook and your pen. All right, we're ready for this. So this person totally bought into the Refine Lab strategy. She thinks that we rock. She calls me out specifically. No, just kidding. She has some leeway at her company to experiment with both organic and demand gen campaigns, and overall a CMO that's supportive. But she is held to some specific qualified lead goals. And they are running old school demand gen tactics to get those leads. She is wondering how she can strike a happy medium. She thinks that she's going to have to continue to run some of the old school campaigns, but her CMO is open to trying new things. She notes that the executives are definitely not interested in doing a podcast, so that's not an option in her context. Little bit more about the company. They're a B2B SaaS affiliate marketing platform. Series A, 45 employees, 8 people on the marketing team. There's a lot of competition, but the space hasn't been clearly defined. They are hoping to be category definers. They're doing PPC and paid advertising. But given this context, she's curious how you would approach the marketing strategy. Happy to repeat anything or answer any questions.
Good luck defining your category with a PPC strategy. Like, if you want to design and dominate a category, you're gonna have to think differently about marketing. The fact that executives write off a podcast for no specific reason at that level, based on what was in the question about what you want to accomplish, is completely ludicrous. Like, the podcast that feeds organic social, that allows you to talk to a ton of different customers and prospects and influential people, and conduct market research and build relationships. Everyone should be doing it. So the happy medium, sure, if you want to strike it, then you definitely can. You can take 50% of the budget and you can keep doing content syndication and PPC and paid social lead gen, because that's what everyone does. And then you can take the other 50% and you can try and do something differently. The challenge is that when you take your budget down by 50%, your leads are going to go down 50%. And that's not going to sit well with the executive team. What you're trying to do is change the metrics and the activities before you've changed the mindset. And so when you go in here and you say, I want to go 50-50, you're basically going to need to double your budget to maintain the lead flow in order to do this. And so some companies do it, right? Like, I've shown companies that their like CAC payback on their lead gen strategy, holistic paid lead gen strategy, CAC payback 48 months. That's 4 years to pay back the cost of acquiring a customer. And they told me they want to go 50%. And I was like, what are we doing here? Right? Like, okay, so you want to continue to take 50% of your budget, win 0.1% of leads, and have a net negative. Like, that's only advertising customer acquisition cost. Imagine adding marketing and sales. Like, you want to take a decade to pay back your customer acquisition cost on some of this stuff. And so the 50-50 strategy, you can do it if you want, but it's like definitely not my recommendation. I think that you need to pick a lane. Like, what is the strategy? So some companies do it, but it's not my ideal. But theoretically, if you want to do it, cut your budget in 50% or double your budget so that you have 100% that you can run in lead gen. Keep running lead gen so your SDRs have leads to call that don't close. And then you can start to experiment with other things. The problem is that I just caught myself saying it, I just called it an experiment. And so what's going to happen is you're going to keep running the lead gen. You're going to do this experiment for 2 or 3 months. You're not going to have a ton of tangible things to show for it because the company's still obsessed with leading metrics and vanity metrics like leads. These experiments are going to be deemed failures. And then you're going to go back to doing the same thing you were doing before. So the real recommendation is use the data to show executives, and first look at the data yourself. If the data is good on your lead gen strategy, which does happen every once in a while with a company that has a ridiculous offer, like, hey, sign up and you're going to make $50,000, right? Like, some companies have ridiculous offers where lead gen strategies work, but 99% of companies don't. And so look at your data. If the data is as expected, the high probability that it will not be good at a customer acquisition cost and lead to win standpoint, then you can use that to try and help executives change their mindset to realize that these activities are actually entirely unproductive. We're just wasting money and wasting people's time when we do them. And then if they're able to buy into that, then it's very easy to go over and say, actually, we're going to move all the budget over here. And when we shut all of this lead gen stuff off, our qualified pipeline, if you define SQO appropriately and not at like they had a BANT call with an SDR, like it's a true qualified opportunity, your number of qualified ops is going to stay exactly the same when you shut off your lead gen strategy, because if you actually looked at the data, you'd realize that 1% of leads, if that, I've seen less than that, 1% of leads that you generate get to qualified opportunity. So you're out there generating 1,000 leads a month and getting 10 qualified opportunities, and you're going to win those at 10%. A lot of activity for one customer. Not what I want to do.
What I would just add into the mix is it seems that you have an open-minded CMO. So maybe the other executives aren't as open-minded, but it seems like your CMO is. So I would also have a conversation with them directly and better understand what they're trying to do and the impact that they're trying to have. Your CMO will ultimately have more influence with executives. And so there might be an opportunity to better understand why they're open-minded, where they're coming from, and how they might be able to help you achieve your goal or help you shift perspective. So I would talk with your CMO as well and kind of use them as your ally in this process. Let's switch gears. Ashley has a different kind of question that I have some thoughts on it. We'll hear what you think though, Chris. Ashley, I'm going to bring you on. DGL loyalist.
Were you on episode 1, Ashley? Timeout. Were you on episode 1?
No, I don't think I started till that summer. Like sometime.
I'm going to go back and now I want to. I'm going to go back and look at the registration list for episode 1 if we still have that data and just see the people that were there. That'd be funny.
I'm the one where I screamed at Josie because I thought that I was muted. So, speaking of spending time with people, Simple Focus software, the portfolio is overdue in offsite. We have Lake Week coming up in September, which was canceled last year. We have a small team of core people who are attending. So we've got product, head developer, customer success, and marketing, and CEO. It's like CEO is very engaged in this. Mm-hmm. And we're doing like a week at the lake and pontoon boat stuff and activities like that. But I'm looking for some fresh ideas for setting some goals and like anything that you might be able to offer up for me to develop into, like, it's worked well for teams in the past, or what is a good way to use time with a team that is 100% remote that is going to be together for a week. So
I don't know if everyone
I'm playing.
This is going straight to Megan.
Give me some stuff to do.
I happen to be planning our first Refine Labs offsite for September as well. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have boats at the offsite, so shame on me. But I'm working on some really great programming ideas, and so I'll break down some things for you. I think one of the things that's important whenever you're planning something like this is what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? And I think that when I was outlining my goals for the offsite, it's an opportunity, obviously, for a lot of us to meet for the first time in person. So there's a lot to be said around, team bonding, morale building, camaraderie, and really, leaning into that because it can have a big impact on everything. The other thing is, what are things that you can do in person that are better to do in person than on Zoom, right? So things like brainstorming or collaborative discussion. And then the other piece is, we are in person. So are there assessments or activities that you can do that give people more self-awareness and more understanding and empathy for each other so that they'll be able to take that back? And when we're back in a remote setting, we have improved collaboration. And so some of the things that we're planning are, of course, keynotes on the vision so that you can kind of motivate people for the future, structured smaller group brainstorming sessions, but with an actual deliverable that people have to summarize and consolidate what they discussed the next day, and having team leaders plan ahead to make that impactful. And we're actually doing an assessment. So we'll send out an assessment in advance. People will take a quiz, they'll learn their type and then how they interact with people, and we'll be able to do exercises together. I've done a ton of offsites too. So my rule of thumb is wrap up the day about 3:30 or 4, and then get to your boat and your fun stuff. Like, people only have about 5 to 6 hours of time to really invest in things like that. I'd also think about opportunities for recognition while everybody is together, as well as getting feedback and input from all across everything. And simple is better. Don't over plan. So hope you enjoyed my tips.
Yes.
Any follow-up questions?
How do you feel about actually getting a thing done within the time frame of the session? Like, we were contemplating, we really need to do mission, vision, values for the portfolio, because it has evolved a lot in the last year, and we were thinking of using our skill set to not just brainstorm and whiteboard that, but to actually pump out a one-pager website.
So you can definitely create some structure and some parameters to drive towards a deliverable. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm the queen of next steps, and we can't just be talking about stuff. Let's have something to show for what we're doing. But I wouldn't over optimize for it, because if you can use the time together to actually get all the thoughts on the table, clarify themes and trends, and there can be an owner that can tie it up later, there's nothing wrong with that. So I wouldn't be too worried about ensuring that you have some polished final thing done. It's unlikely that will happen anyway. It's likely it'll continue to be iterated on post-event. And it just goes back to what are the goals? Why are you actually getting everyone together? Is it to have this defined output, or is it actually to, all of the other things that I had mentioned earlier?
Agreed. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So it seems like Refine Lab is focusing on consistent, sustainable programs that build momentum, right? Running events every week, multiple events, sometimes in a week. There's also a concept of lightning strikes out there of, hey, here's this major event for magnetizing attention, which there's PR, owned media, all kinds of things going on around it, with kind of a bigger slingshot pullback. And just curious how Refine Labs thinks about major announcements, less frequent events versus a really strong, consistent, relevant, strategy like you seem to be executing.
It's a really interesting question. I understand the concept of a lightning strike, and I understand that companies spend a lot of time manufacturing them, specifically around the time of big funding rounds, which is great. I'm not gonna downplay that move, but typically those companies actually aren't executing a very consistent process over time. My belief is that the lightning strikes happen naturally through consistency, right? I would argue that being published in Forbes was a pretty big deal for the company at our scale, with $0 investment just through working for it. Over time, I'll be speaking at large conferences, which could be viewed as a lightning strike if you add other things in. It's not something that we think about manufacturing. If we're coming up on new launches or new announcements or things like that, I just consider that a launch. I don't necessarily consider that I guess by definition it would be a lightning strike if you put PR, some big event, and something together. So if we're going to launch a product, then we'll think about doing that. But it is not a large part of our strategy at the moment.
Cool. That was a great question. All right. We are tapped out. That was a good Q&A session. I feel like you've got to get back on another boat. Let's wrap it up. Closing thoughts?
Cool. Yeah, everyone. This was this is completing my one of the longest working days that I've had in a long time. I had a conference pretty early in the morning all the way to here, and obviously my favorite part of the day was hanging out with all of you. Really love it. Honestly, toward the end, I messaged Megan. I was like, I'm literally about to pass out, so we can't take any more questions. Really appreciate you bearing with us. Obviously, love having you here. I think this was episode 76 or somewhere between 76 and 80, which is amazing. Like, we're doing this a lot. I see the same faces. People are getting better, learning a bunch of things. I just really appreciate all of you and appreciate the community that we're building here. And so also shout out to Jess and Ashley, that new podcast. I see it in LinkedIn. So cool. Keep it up. Love the positioning on real tactical with the screen shares. Killing
Hitting
it.
CTA.
Yeah. So
dropping the name.
No big closeout, but yeah, appreciate all you joining, and we'll be back to. Oh, we might have a special episode of Demand Gen Live next week as a little cliffhanger. So stay tuned for that and look forward to seeing you soon.
Have a good week, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Great questions tonight.
Hey, everyone. This is Chris Walker, the CEO of Refine Labs. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe to the channel for more videos in the future. We're also live for Demand Gen Live at 7:30 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday night, which will also go on the State of Demand Gen podcast, which is available on Apple and Spotify. Thanks again, and see you next time.